Hi, this is Natalie Rydstrom here from sportsbookreview.com, and today we're going to be speaking with Howard Hodgson, director at the Aston Villa Supporters Trust, to discuss new manager Rémi Garde ahead of his debut match against Manchester City at Villa Park on Sunday, and the Villains' future in the Premier League. Howard, great to have you on the show.
Hi, Natalie. How are you?
Very well indeed. Listen, let's start with you. Tell us about yourself and the history with the club.
Right. Well, I've been attending Aston Villa for nearly 40 years. So, yeah, for nearly 4 decades. Started in a wonderful era in the late 70s, basically. And Ron Saunders was manager. And by the way, it's his birthday today. So happy birthday, Ron. And he basically guided us to, within 3 years of me being a supporter, to being champions of England and then European champions. I think we're only one of 5 clubs, British clubs, that's ever won the Champions League, as it is called now. It was the European Cup in those days. So it was all great in the early days, but sadly, it's been a bit of a roller coaster since. We got relegated 5 years after being champions of Europe in 86, 87. We haven't been relegated from the top flight since. We got re-promoted the following season, and we've been ever present since. But the last 5 years have been a real struggle. We've had Randy Lerner as owner since 2006. And in the early days when Martin O'Neill was manager, it looked really good. We were finishing in the top 6 regularly. We got to a few cup finals and it was starting to look very rosy. Then they fell out. Randy stopped investing the money that he had been. And the last 5 years have been a real struggle. It's still got to the point where he wants to sell the club, and we've been sort of perennial strugglers. Mm-hmm. I joined the Aston Villa Supporters Trust as a director nearly a year ago to try and help and see what we could do as supporters to try and get the club back to where it belongs. It's a very big club. It's got a fantastic fan base, fantastic stadium, fantastic history. But the present at the moment and the future at the moment doesn't look particularly bright. So, hopefully another new manager has been appointed and we can start improving.
Yeah. Well, let's just go back slightly there. Obviously, Tim Sherwood was brought in last February to help the club avoid relegation, which he did. And one of the things he did do was put Christian Benteke up front. And I think that was a pivotal move to keep Aston Villa up. But obviously, the next season he was transferred to Liverpool without really a good replacement. Was that, in your opinion, a good move or a bad move?
So you're asking me if it's a good move or not to sell Benteke?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in an ideal world, you keep Benteke. I mean, Benteke is a world-class striker and a striker that we sort of developed him into. I mean, he had potential when we signed him from Genk in Belgium, but we've developed him into this sort of top striker. However, he had a release clause in his contract of £32.5 million. So when Liverpool came up with the offer, there was nothing that Villa could do about it, so they had to sell him.
Yeah.
But he has left a huge void in the goal scoring department because, the last 3 seasons that player has been the majority goal scorer for this football club. And although we bought 13 new players in the summer, and amongst those there were some forward players, but none of them as yet have shown the natural goal-scoring instincts that Christian Benteke undoubtedly has. And that means we're not scoring goals and why we're struggling at the bottom of the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Aston Villa, like you said, are at the bottom of the league right now, just 4 points. You've won 1 match, drawn 1 and lost 9. What maybe in a nutshell could you sort of describe as going wrong right now?
We've been the creators of our own problems a lot of the time. Certainly in the last 5 years, but especially this season. Basically, as you know, Tim Sherwood came in towards the end of last season, kept us up, and he was very, very popular. I thought he was terrific. He was like a breath of fresh air when he came in. But something changed in the summer. We sold, as you alluded to, Benteke. Also, Fabian Delph left. England international, again, had an exit clause in his contract. And Tom Cleverley left as well. And some other players too. It was a high turnover of players. I think 12 went out and 13 came in. And a lot of the players that were signed are what now people are terming moneyball signings. So players with a lot of potential, primarily from France and Spain, but unproven in the Premier League. And Tim Sherwood, on the 2nd of September, when the window shut, said he was delighted with the signings and was very confident we'd have a good season. 6 weeks later, it was all coming out in the press that, in fact, he wasn't happy with the signings and that it was largely a transfer committee that had approved the signings, i.e. Paddy Riley, the director of recruitment at Aston Villa, and Hendrik Almstedt, formerly of Arsenal and who's now the director of football operations at Aston Villa. And this is all headed by Tom Fox, the chief executive, who is also ex-Arsenal. Now, I keep mentioning ex-Arsenal because there's a link here, because Rémi Garde is also ex-Arsenal. So Tim started to feel that it wasn't his squad, or was certainly giving that impression. And in the last few weeks, we've had some really, really weird team selections where, culminating on against Spurs last Monday, 12 of the 13 new signings weren't even picked. None of them were even in the team. So there was like some real political selections going on, people making statements with selections and all sorts. Now, Tim had already gone. Kevin MacDonald was in charge, and, you know, he had been on Tim's staff. And some of these selections were very, very baffling and damaging to us. So that's what I mean when I say we've created a lot of our own problems, because there's been a lot of politics and infighting. We don't seem to have had a proper harmonious football club, and the Premier League's just too tough. If you're not all, you know, working off the same sheet and pulling together, then it's a recipe for relegation. So let's hope Rémi Garde coming in is going to be someone that can turn all that around.
Well, I was going to say, moving to the positive, obviously Tim Sherwood is out. Rémi Garde makes his debut match this Sunday against Man City at Villa Park. How does Rémi differ from Tim Sherwood?
They are completely different. I mean, Tim is very much a man motivator, in-your-face character, big ego, big belief in himself. Certainly, that's the impression he gives anyway to the public. Whereas Rémi, from the research, I mean, I've not met him yet, but from all the research we've done on him, he's very much more of a thinker, more of a team player, possibly, and certainly less political, but still a very strong character. And I just think he's somebody that's going to fit in with this particular structure that we now have in terms of the director of football, etc. And the route we've gone down with a lot of these European players. We've brought an awful lot of players from Europe. And I think Rémi, with his coaching methods and his style and his techniques, should hopefully be a good fit for this current Aston Villa side.
Okay. And can we expect to see any changes to the team this Sunday?
Yeah, like I was saying, against Spurs, all the new players, virtually all of them except Joleon Lescott, had been left out, which is just wrong, I have to say. I mean, because I've seen all the games this season, and actually, a lot of these new players have a lot of potential and ability. They just haven't really had a chance yet to gel as a team, because the team's been chopped and changed every week, and they've not really ever played together for more than a game at a time. So, I would expect, look, he hasn't had very long. He's had a couple of days, so we can't expect miracles overnight. I do expect to see some changes in the team. I think a lot of the French lads that were left out will probably come back in, not just because they're French, but because they're good players. And I would hope to see Carlos Gil start again, because a lot of the fans, myself included, think he's probably our most effective offensive player at the moment, and he hasn't been starting under Sherwood.
Do you have a predicted outcome from the match on Sunday?
It's really hard with Aston Villa at the moment to predict a result until you see the team sheet. When I saw the team sheet against Spurs, it was pretty obvious we were going to lose. But taking into account that Remy hopefully picks a really sensible team based on merit rather than politics, which there shouldn't be any politics there now, so that should be a given. So I'm hoping he'll pick a good side. They'll be eager to impress him, his first game in charge. But nevertheless, Manchester City are a very, very strong team, probably the best team in the Premier League. So I'm going to be optimistic. I never predict Villa defeats, even though they've lost nearly every week since the first game of the season. So I'm going to go for a very positive 2-2 draw.
2-2 draw. Okay, very good indeed. Listen, what about obviously we're coming up to January here. Do you guys have sort of your eyes set on any players or any sort of big signings that you're thinking of making or changes come January?
Yeah, I mean, Rémi Garde did his first press conference yesterday as Aston Villa manager, and he was asked that question, and he did allude to the fact that Randy Lerner had been to see him, and they'd had some very positive meetings, and that if he needed some players in January, then certainly there would be funds available. Remy sort of said he's got 10 games, I think, between now and the January window, and he's going to be looking very closely at the squad, its strengths and weaknesses firsthand. And obviously, if it becomes clear that we need certain players, then I'm sure he'll buy them. I do think, as you've mentioned already, Natalie, that a goal scorer will be very high on that list. Probably a right back as well. We're still struggling at right back. Alan Hutton and Bakuna, they can't really make that position their own. And certainly Brad Guzan in goal's been struggling as well. So a goalkeeper, a right back and a striker, if you were basing it from today, would be priorities.
And do you have any sort of long-term plans with Aston Villa and sort of, over the next sort of couple of years, say?
Myself, obviously, I'll always be a supporter. So that's, what do they say, Villa till you die. So that's long term. So I'll certainly always be heavily involved as a supporter. It's in the blood. In terms of anything else, well, the work I do with the Supporters Association, I enjoy very much, and I'll be continuing with that. And we do a lot of good things for the club, including free tickets to every match that we funded for supporters, and work with the FSF on fair pricing, especially for away fans, and a number of, and safe standing. We're looking at that at the moment. So a number of issues that we continue to work on, and obviously, if I can, I know the club is still for sale. It's still on the Bank of America's books, and it's still being touted around the globe, trying to find someone who wants to take it on. And if I can find anyone, then I'll be certainly all ears. So keep your ears open out there.
All right, fantastic. Listen, finally, one more question here. Aston Villa are obviously one of the favourites to be relegated, 1.4 there, Bet365. I believe, but don't quote me, that there's been 2 teams in history who have pulled themselves up from where Aston Villa now sit to stay, obviously, in the Premier League. In your opinion, can they do it? Will we see Aston Villa in the Premier League next season?
That's the big question, isn't it? The $64 million question. Well, more than that. I think it's worth over £100 million if Villa stay up or not, because the TV deal goes up hugely next season. So it's absolutely vital Villa do stay up. Whether they can or not, it's going to be difficult. They've only got 4 points from 11 games. They haven't won since the first game of the season. They're probably going to have to win at least 11 games of the remaining 27 to stay up. So the equation gets harder with every passing week. Having said that, we've got a new manager. We do have some good players, and we are only 4 points adrift. Bournemouth are in a slump now because they've had some terrible injuries. Norwich are losing most weeks, and Sunderland and Newcastle are sort of continually struggling a bit like us. So we're far from dead, and we can certainly do it. But we do need to get that first win fast, because the belief is draining from the players, and losing has become a terrible habit that they can't seem to kick. So hopefully the new manager and his new ideas will get us that win fairly quickly. Be lovely if it was on Sunday, but that's obviously a tall order. But sooner rather than later. And then the confidence hopefully should start to flow again. And if that happens, then no reason why they can't stay up. If I was having a bet, I would definitely have a bet on them staying up, because I would have imagined the odds on Aston Villa staying up at the moment are quite attractive.
Yeah, I bet so indeed. Howard, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for coming on the show.
Cheers, Natalie.